I never expected the board meeting invitation to end with my public humiliation, watching the CEO's unqualified son take the position I'd worked 10 years to earn. As I packed up my corner office for a basement cubicle, I discovered the financial fraud that would change everything. They didn't realize the man they were setting up as their fall guy would be the one who'd bring their corrupt empire crashing down and take the CEO's chair. The email notification pinged loudly in the quiet office. Most of my team had already left for the day, but I was still finalizing the quarterly reports. Richard Weber, our CEO, had never directly emailed me in my 3 years at Oceanic Innovations. My heart raced as I clicked open the message. The executive board requests your presence at tomorrow's emergency meeting. 9 a.m. sharp. Short, direct, terrifying. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Meredith from sales had received the same email. Derek, what's happening? Board meetings are for executives only. Her voice trembled slightly. Meredith had started at Oceanic the same week I did. We climbed the ranks together, celebrated wins together, survived the company's roughest patches together. It has to be about Asia, I said, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. The Asia expansion had been my biggest gamble, a complete restructuring of our marketing approach in a region where American companies typically struggled. I'd fought for that project against enormous pushback even from our notoriously difficult CFO Bailey. The numbers came in. Yesterday, we're up 43% over projections. That's incredible. Meredith paused. Wait, you think they're promoting you? To what? My mind raced through the possibilities. Vice President of Global Marketing? Chief Marketing Officer? The current VP, Burke, had been making noise about retirement. Maybe they were finally recognizing my contributions. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, missed family events, and postponed vacations might finally be paying off. I don't know, I admitted, but they don't call emergency board meetings to fire people. After hanging up, I stared at my desk calendar where I'd penciled in weekend plans with my girlfriend Addison at her parents' lake house. With a sigh, I dialed her number. You're canceling, she said flatly before I could speak. Just postponing. Something big is happening at work. The board wants to see me tomorrow. The board? Her tone shifted immediately. Derek, that's huge. Is it about your Asia project? For the next hour, I organized presentation materials, rehearsed potential talking points, and even Googled salary negotiations for executive positions. The office emptied completely, leaving me alone with my thoughts and growing excitement. On my way to the parking garage, voices echoed from around the corner. I slowed my pace, recognizing Richard's distinctive baritone. It's all arranged for tomorrow, he was saying. The board's on board. Jack's paperwork is ready. Jack was Richard's son, a 20-something MBA dropout who'd been learning the business by floating between departments for the past few months. We'd barely exchanged 10 words, mainly because he rarely showed up before noon and spent most of his time on his phone. And Derek Shepard? Asked a second voice, Preston from legal. He'll understand his place in the new structure, Richard replied with a cold finality that sent a chill through me. I backed away quietly and took the stairs instead. In the parking garage, I spotted Jack loading boxes into his BMW. Our eyes met briefly across the concrete expanse. His expression wasn't smug or triumphant, it was almost apologetic. My stomach knotted as I drove home, Richard's words playing on loop in my mind. What did he mean by my place in the new structure? Was I getting a different position than I'd imagined? Was Jack somehow involved? I tried calling Burke, my direct supervisor, but got his voicemail. Then I tried Christina, my assistant, who always knew the office gossip before anyone else. No answer. Sleep eluded me that night. By 6 a.m., I gave up trying and dressed meticulously in my best suit, the one I'd splurged on after landing the Asia deal. In the mirror, I practiced expressions. Confident but not arrogant, grateful but not desperate, surprised but not overwhelmed. The office hummed with unusual early morning activity when I arrived. People clustered in small groups, conversations dying as I passed. Arizona from HR smiled sympathetically. Owen from development avoided eye contact entirely. Meredith intercepted me by the coffee machine. Something's off, she whispered urgently. Jack Weber's in the executive conference room. He's wearing a suit and Richard's introducing him to all the board members individually. Maybe he's finally getting a real job somewhere else, I suggested, but my voice lacked conviction. Derek, Meredith gripped my arm. I overheard Bailey talking about reorganization. Marketing. Reorganization. Before I could respond, Christina appeared at my elbow. Board's asking for you, she said, her face carefully blank. And Derek? Whatever happens in there, we're all behind you. The walk to the boardroom felt like wading through quicksand. Through the glass walls, I could see 12 people seated around the mahogany table. Richard stood at the head, gesturing animatedly. Jack sat at his right hand, looking uncomfortable in his too-new suit. I checked my watch, 8:55. 5 minutes early. As I pushed open the door, all conversation ceased. 12 pairs of eyes turned to me, filled with something uncomfortably close to pity. "Ah, Derek," Richard smiled broadly. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing your future at Oceanic." My future. The conference room fell silent enough to hear the air conditioning hum overhead. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes as he gestured to an empty chair, not at the table, but slightly behind it, like an afterthought. The setup alone told me everything I needed to know. "We've been reviewing the company structure," Richard began, his voice carrying that practiced sincerity he used in corporate videos. "Oceanic is growing faster than any of us anticipated, largely thanks to certain innovative strategies." He nodded in my direction without quite looking at me. My grip tightened on my portfolio case. Inside were detailed presentations on the Asia expansion's next phase, charts, projections, testimonials from regional partners. I'd been up until 3 a.m. perfecting them, believing today would be my moment to shine. To capitalize on this growth, Richard continued, the board has unanimously approved a significant restructuring of our marketing division. We're creating a new position, Chief Marketing Officer, to oversee all regional directors and global initiatives. My heart raced. This was it. This was the promotion I'd been working toward. I shifted forward in my seat, trying to maintain composure while Burke avoided my gaze from across the table. "This position requires someone with a unique perspective," Richard was saying. "Someone who can see Oceanic not just as a business, but as a legacy." He turned toward the door with theatrical timing. "I'd like to introduce our new CMO." Jack Weber strode in, his stance radiating unearned confidence. He'd gotten a haircut since yesterday. Gone was the shaggy, boyish look, replaced with something more corporate and controlled. His suit probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Most of you know my son Jack," Richard said, and something inside me shattered. "He's been learning our business from the ground up for the past few months and has impressed everyone with his fresh vision and strategic thinking." Jack shook hands with each board member as Richard continued listing qualifications. Jack simply didn't possess Harvard business background. He dropped out after 1 semester. Entrepreneurial experience, a failed app startup funded entirely by his father. Deep understanding of global markets, he'd once spent a summer in Cancun. The blood rushed to my face, pounding in my ears so loudly I almost missed my name when Richard finally addressed me directly. "Derek," he turned with that same practiced smile. "Your work on the Asia expansion has been noticed and appreciated. Under the new structure, you'll be transitioning to Regional Director for North America, reporting directly to Jack starting Monday." A demotion. Wrapped in corporate platitudes, but a demotion nonetheless. My mouth went dry as I calculated the implications: smaller office, reduced budget authority, team reassignments, probable pay cut, and the ultimate insult, reporting to the unqualified son of the boss. "I'm looking forward to working together," Jack said, extending his hand across the table toward me, his voice carrying just enough condescension to make clear the power dynamic. The room watched expectantly. I shook his hand because refusing would make me look petty, unprofessional, emotional, all the things they could use to justify pushing me aside. Jack's grip was clammy, nervous beneath the bravado. "Are there questions about the new structure?" Richard asked, already turning to the next agenda item. The message was clear: my demotion wasn't up for discussion. I found my voice somehow. "Actually, yes. The Asia expansion is at a critical juncture. The relationships I've built personally with the regional partners are Jack will be taking over those relationships," Richard cut in smoothly. "He'll need a complete briefing, of course. Your transition report is expected by end of day. End of day. 10 hours to summarize 3 years of work for someone who wouldn't understand it." I glanced at the portfolio case in my lap, my beautiful presentation now irrelevant. "If there's nothing else," Richard continued, "let's move on to quarterly projections." And just like that, they proceeded as if my career hadn't just imploded. I sat through 40 excruciating minutes of financial discussions, marketing budgets, my marketing budgets being reallocated, and strategic decisions made without my input. Jack took detailed notes, interrupting occasionally with questions that revealed his complete ignorance of our business. As the meeting adjourned, Burke finally approached me, voice low. I fought this, Derek. The decision came directly from Richard and the investment partners. Why? I managed to ask. The Asia numbers are incredible. We're projected to double our market share by year-end. Something flickered across Burke's face: concern, confusion, guilt? That's not what the final report shows. Before I could press further, Richard clapped Jack on the back. Let's get you set up in your new office. Derek, you'll need to clear out your things. We've repurposed your corner office for the CMO position. I stood in the emptying conference room, clutching my useless portfolio. Through the glass walls, I watched Richard parade Jack around the office, introducing him to my team, my people who looked confused and uncomfortable. Meredith was waiting in the hallway, face ashen. Everyone got an email announcement 5 minutes ago. Exciting organizational changes effective immediately. Derek, what the hell happened? I showed her my phone screen, dozens of notifications flooding in. Emails expressing confusion, calendar invites to Jack's welcome reception, messages from clients asking if I was leaving the company. They've been planning this for weeks, I said as realization dawned. The emergency meeting wasn't about promoting me. It was about putting me in my place publicly so no one would question the decision. Christina rushed up, breathless. Derek, you need to see this right now. She thrust her tablet into my hands, open to our internal financial dashboard. These are the Asia projections that were presented to the board last week. The numbers made no sense. Where my project had shown consistent growth and profitability, these charts showed declining engagement, ballooning costs, and disastrous ROI projections. That's impossible, I whispered. These aren't my numbers. Exactly, Christina said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Someone changed them too. Days ago. Look at the user ID on the modification log. The username sent ice through my veins, @Weber_admin. There's something else, Meredith added. Jack's last position at Dawson Enterprises? The company announced an internal investigation for financial misconduct the day after he resigned. The timing can't be coincidence. As we spoke, I watched through the glass as Jack entered my office, my former office, and immediately began rearranging the furniture. He lifted the framed photograph of my team from my desk and casually handed it to a maintenance worker who was removing my nameplate from the door. They're erasing me, I murmured, the full weight of the situation finally hitting me. This isn't just a demotion. This is the beginning of forcing me out completely. Christina's phone buzzed. Her eyes widened as she read the message. IT just got orders to restrict your system access. You've got maybe an hour before your email and network drives get locked down. Why would they? I started, then stopped as another realization hit. They're hiding something. Something in those Asia numbers. Something they don't want me to find. The elevator dinged and Rose from accounting stepped out, clutching a stack of folders. Our eyes met across the office floor. Her expression shifted from surprise to determination, and she changed direction, heading straight for us. Derek, she said quietly, we need to talk. Not here. Meet me at Paradise Diner in 1 hour. And download everything you can before they lock you out. This goes deeper than you think. The Paradise Diner smelled of burnt coffee and decades of grease. Rain drummed against the windows, matching my dark mood as I slid into the back booth where Rose waited. Her normally pristine appearance was disheveled, hair pulled back hastily, no makeup, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. You weren't followed? She asked in lieu of greeting. I took a cab 3 blocks away and walked, I replied, unsure why I felt the need for such precautions but trusting the urgency in her voice. What's going on, Rose? She pushed a manila folder across the faded Formica table. Before we start, you need to know that sharing this puts my job at risk. Possibly worse. Inside the folder were financial statements, dozens of pages of numbers that initially made little sense. Then Rose flipped to a highlighted section and my confusion transformed into disbelief. These are the real Asia numbers pulled directly from our regional accounting system, she explained. Compare them to what was presented to the board. The discrepancy was staggering, not just minor adjustments but wholesale manipulation. My successful expansion had been artificially transformed into a looming disaster. Why would Richard sabotage his own company's success? I asked, struggling to understand. Rose's laugh held no humor. He's not sabotaging the company. He's sabotaging you. The timing makes perfect sense when you look at the bigger picture. She pulled out another document, an SEC filing dated 3 months ago. Richard needs to maintain majority control. to keep his position as CEO. His divorce last year forced him to liquidate shares to pay the settlement. He's 4% short of what the company charter requires. What does this have to do with me or the Asia expansion? Your project's success attracted attention from the investment partners. They started asking questions about other market expansions, wanting more aggressive growth. Richard was losing control of the narrative. She lowered her voice further. Then there's Jack's situation at Dawson Enterprises. Their fraud investigation is gaining momentum. He needed an exit strategy and a soft landing. I connected the pieces. So Richard discredits my work, installs Jack in a position of authority, and maintains control of the board by keeping the investment partners focused on a manufactured problem instead of questioning his leadership. Rose nodded grimly. But there's more. Bailey has been raising red flags about inconsistencies in the quarterly reports. 3 whistleblower complaints have been filed with compliance in the past month. Richard needs a scapegoat, and you've been selected for the role. My coffee sat untouched, growing cold. They're setting me up to take the fall for something bigger. Exactly. By demoting you publicly while praising your previous work, they create the perfect narrative. The promising executive who cut corners to achieve results then grew disgruntled when he wasn't rewarded. When the financial irregularities become impossible to hide, guess who takes the blame? The diner's bell jingled as new customers entered. Rose stiffened until she confirmed they weren't from Oceanic. You need to protect yourself, Derek. They'll be building a paper trail. Emails will be doctored. Signatures forged. I made copies of everything, I said. Downloaded all my files, emails, presentations. But that might not be enough if they're manipulating the system records. Rose hesitated, then reached into her bag and removed a small digital recorder. Bailey suspected something was wrong months ago. She's been recording her meetings with Richard and the board, including yesterday when they discussed your demotion and how to handle the Derek situation if you didn't accept your new position quietly. I stared at the recorder. Is that legal? In this state, only one party needs to consent to a recording. But using it would end Bailey's career instantly. Why would she risk that for me? Not for you. For the company. For the 300 employees who would lose everything if this fraud comes to light unprepared. Rose pushed the recorder toward me. Listen to it, but don't act yet. We need more evidence. As I reached for it, my phone buzzed with a text from Meredith. Emergency. Jack calling. Emergency team meeting in 30 minutes. Says attendance mandatory to discuss loyalty to new leadership. Where are you? Rose saw the message and her expression hardened. They're moving faster than I thought. Jack's isolating your team, testing who's loyal to you versus the company. Classic divide and conquer. Another text arrived. This one from Christina. IT just pulled your computer for routine maintenance. Your emails from the past 6 months are being reviewed for quality assurance purposes. They're coming for you. The rain intensified outside, matching the storm building inside me. I spent 3 years giving everything to Oceanic. My time, my creativity, my health. I'd sacrificed relationships, missed family events, postponed my own dreams to build something meaningful. And now they were systematically dismantling not just my career but my reputation. What's the play? I asked Rose, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. First, don't go back to the office today. Call in sick. They'll be watching for emotional reactions. They can document and use against you. Second, secure legal representation immediately, not anyone connected to Oceanic. Third, establish independent verification of your work products and processes. As Rose outlined the defense strategy, I noticed a familiar figure entering the diner, Burke, my former supervisor, looking equally furtive. He spotted us and approached cautiously. Should have known Bailey would send you, he said to Rose, sliding into the booth beside her. To me, he added, I owe you an explanation and an apology. I tried to warn you, but Richard threatened my pension if I interfered. Is that worth my career? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Burke winced. I'm here now, aren't I? At considerable risk. He produced a USB drive. This contains the original board presentations for the Asia expansion, before Richard's alterations. Proves you presented accurate data and that someone changed it afterward. My phone buzzed again. 5 new messages, including one from Jack directly. Your continued absence is being noted. Team meeting begins in 15 minutes. Your presence will demonstrate your commitment to company priorities. They're baiting you, Rose warned. If you show up emotional or confrontational, they'll document it as insubordination. And if I don't show, they'll cite it as abandonment of responsibilities during transition, Burke replied. They've created a no-win situation. I stared at the evidence accumulating on the table, the financial documents, the recorder, the USB drive, pieces of a puzzle that painted a damning picture of corruption, nepotism, and fraud. Richard and Jack had miscalculated badly in choosing me as their scapegoat. They thought I'd either accept the demotion quietly or explode in a career-ending tirade. They never expected me to fight back strategically. I need to make a phone call, I said, standing abruptly. Someone who can help us navigate this properly. Burke looked alarmed. Who? I allowed myself the first genuine smile since the board meeting. My girlfriend Addison, the corporate attorney who specializes in whistleblower protections and executive fraud. Rose's eyes widened. The Addison Montgomery? From the Dawson Enterprises investigation? The very same, I confirmed. And Richard just gave her perfect reason to look deeper into Oceanic's operations. As I stepped outside to make the call, I glanced back through the rain-streaked windows at Rose and Burke huddled over the evidence. For the first time since reading Richard's email, I felt something other than shock and betrayal. I felt the tide beginning to turn. Addison's law office occupied the 27th floor of a gleaming downtown tower, a world away from the fluorescent-lit cubicles of Oceanic. Her assistant ushered us into a conference room where she waited, surrounded by 3 colleagues and mountains of documents. This is worse than I thought, she said after we'd spent 2 hours reviewing the evidence. No kiss hello, no sympathetic platitudes, just the razor-sharp focus that had made her one of the most feared corporate attorneys in the state. They've created a textbook hostile work environment designed to force your resignation or misconduct. Burke shifted uncomfortably. Is this meeting protected? Legally speaking, attorney-client privilege, Addison confirmed. Everything said here is confidential. Then you should know Richard's done this before, Burke admitted quietly. 3 years ago to the previous marketing director, Arizona Robbins. She questioned some accounting practices, was suddenly demoted, then terminated for performance issues 2 months later. She signed an NDA as part of her severance. Addison made a note. We'll need to speak with her. NDAs don't cover illegal activities. My phone buzzed for the 20th time that afternoon. Another email from Jack, this one, copying the entire executive team. Derek's absence today raises serious concerns about his commitment to Oceanic during this transition. We will be documenting this incident in his personnel file. They're building the paper trail, Rose murmured. Let them, Addison replied with cold precision. Every communication becomes evidence of their pattern. Derek, don't respond to anything yet. Her colleague, a forensic accountant named Teddy, looked up from her laptop. I've identified at least 17 instances where financial data was altered after Derek's original submissions. The modifications all originated from executive-level accounts, primarily Richard's and the CFO's. Bailey wouldn't do this willingly, Rose insisted. Richard must have used her credentials. Addison nodded. Unfortunately, that's nearly impossible to prove without Bailey's testimony. As if summoned by her name, my phone lit up with an incoming call. Bailey's personal number, not her work line. I put it on speaker. Derek? Are you somewhere secure? Her normally commanding voice sounded strained. I'm with legal counsel, I replied. You're on speaker with several witnesses. Bailey exhaled sharply. Good. I don't have much time. Richard called an emergency executive. Meeting after discovering my access to the financial systems was used this morning to download historical data. He's authorized IT to confiscate my computer and phone. They're watching me, but I needed to warn you. They're escalating. What are they planning? Addison asked. Jack is drafting a formal performance improvement plan for Derek, backdated to before the Asia project. Their manufacturing documentation claiming Derek was warned about creative accounting practices months ago. Richard plans to file a complaint with the SEC identifying Derek as the architect of financial misrepresentations. My stomach clenched. They're framing me for their fraud. Precisely, Bailey confirmed. And worse, they've convinced the board that immediate action is necessary to protect the company. They're moving to terminate you for cause by end of week. Addison's expression hardened. Ms. Bailey, are you willing to go on record about what you've witnessed? A long pause. If it comes to that, yes. But understand, Richard has powerful connections. This goes beyond oceanic. After Bailey hung up, the room fell silent. The magnitude of what we were facing settled over us, not just workplace injustice, but potentially criminal conspiracy reaching to the highest levels of the company. I need to get back to the office, Rose said suddenly. If I'm absent too, they'll suspect we're coordinating. Burke nodded. Me too. But first, he pulled out his phone and forwarded us an email chain. Richard accidentally copied me on this last month. He's discussing how to move certain Asia losses off the books using shell companies. Classic fraud scheme. Addison's team pounced on this new evidence while I sat silently, trying to process everything. 3 days ago, I'd been the respected marketing director with a successful expansion project and clear path to advancement. Now I was the target of a corporate conspiracy, fighting to save not just my job, but my professional reputation and possibly my freedom. What happens next? I finally asked. Addison outlined the strategy. Document everything, secure additional witnesses, prepare legal filings, and most critically, decide how aggressively to respond. You have options, she explained. We can negotiate a separation agreement with significant compensation. We can file a wrongful demotion suit and seek reinstatement. Or, she hesitated. Or what? Or we can go nuclear. Whistleblower complaint to the SEC, evidence of financial fraud, public exposure of their schemes. It would likely bring down Richard, Jack, possibly the entire current leadership structure. And Oceanic itself? I asked, thinking of the hundreds of employees who depended on their jobs. The company would survive, but with significant upheaval. Stock would take a hit. Jobs might be lost in the reorganization. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. This wasn't just about my career anymore. It was about an entire company, people with families and mortgages and dreams of their own. My phone buzzed yet again. This time, a text from Christina. Jack just called a department meeting. Told everyone you're under investigation for financial irregularities in the Asia data. Team is confused and scared. He's offering loyalty bonuses to anyone who provides helpful information about marketing practices under Derek. People are starting to talk. The final piece clicked into place. They weren't just removing me, they were systematically destroying everything I'd built, turning my own team against me, poisoning 3 years of relationships and achievements. Let's go nuclear, I decided, surprising myself with the calm in my voice. But strategically, targeted strikes, not carpet bombing. Addison's smile was all predator. That's my specialty. For the next hour, we crafted a precise counterattack. Addison would prepare legal filings while her team secured additional evidence. Rose and Burke would continue documenting internal activities without exposing themselves. And I would do the one thing Richard and Jack never expected. I would return to Oceanic tomorrow and play their game, appearing to accept my demotion, while methodically gathering the final pieces we needed. As our meeting concluded, my phone lit up with a calendar invitation. Transition planning. 9 a.m. Tomorrow. Richard Weber's office. The message included a pointed note. Failure to attend will be considered resignation. Perfect timing, Addison remarked. Remember, your only goal tomorrow is information gathering. Stay calm, appear cooperative, record everything. We'll handle the rest. Outside her office, the city lights were coming on as dusk settled. In 24 hours, those same lights would illuminate a very different corporate landscape. Richard and Jack believed they were tightening the noose around my career. They had no idea I was about to tear apart the entire gallows. The Oceanic lobby felt different as I walked through it the next morning. The same glass and chrome, the same hushed conversations and clicking keyboards, but everything tinged with a new awareness. Employees watched me pass with a mix of pity and curiosity. News travels fast in corporate settings, and my absence yesterday had clearly fueled the rumor mill. Derek! Christina intercepted me by the elevators, her voice professional but her eyes communicating urgent warning. You have visitors waiting in your new office. New office meant the windowless room in the basement, the physical manifestation of my demotion. I nodded my understanding. Any messages while I was out? Several. Most notably, IT needs your laptop for security updates immediately. I told them you'd bring it down personally. She handed me a coffee cup with a yellow sticky note pressed to the bottom. They cloned your hard drive overnight. In the elevator, I mentally reviewed Addison's coaching from last night. Stay calm, peer, cooperative, admit nothing, record everything. The weight of the recording device in my jacket pocket felt both reassuring and dangerous. The basement office was exactly as demoralizing as intended. Cramped, harshly lit, with mismatched furniture and the persistent hum of the building's HVAC system overhead. Jack Weber sat in my chair, feet propped casually on my desk. Richard stood by the small window that faced a concrete retaining wall. Derek! Richard boomed with artificial joviality. Good of you to join us today. We were concerned about your unexpected absence yesterday. I manufactured a sheepish smile. Food poisoning. Should have been more careful about the sushi place near my apartment. Interesting, Jack replied, examining his manicured fingernails. Since Meredith from sales saw you at Paradise Diner with Rose from accounting. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. After I started feeling better, I needed to discuss some Asia vendor payment issues with Rose. Proper financial documentation is a priority for me. Richard and Jack exchanged glances, my emphasis on financial documentation clearly registering. Speaking of documentation, Richard said, his friendly facade fading slightly, we need to discuss some irregularities in the Asia expansion reports. Irregularities? I echoed, the recording device capturing every word. Significant discrepancies between projected and actual expenses. Jack elaborated, sliding a folder across the desk. The board is quite concerned about how these numbers were presented. I opened the folder to find fabricated documents I'd never seen before. Altered projections, falsified approvals, manipulated metrics. Each page was designed to create a paper trail, suggesting I had knowingly misrepresented the Asia results. These aren't my reports, I said quietly, careful to keep accusation from my tone. The original projections I submitted to the board are substantially different. Richard's smile tightened. These are the documents in our system, Derek. Are you suggesting someone altered official company records? The trap was set perfectly. If I accused them directly, I'd appear paranoid and defensive, exactly the behavior they wanted to document. If I accepted responsibility, I'd be admitting to financial misconduct. I'm simply noting the discrepancy, I replied evenly. Perhaps we should compare these to the original files? I maintain comprehensive backups of all my work. Jack snorted. Convenient. Personal backups that could have been modified at any time. I shrugged. The metadata would show any modifications, as would the email timestamps when I submitted them to Burke and the board. Richard's expression darkened momentarily before he forced another smile. Let's set this aside. For now, we're here to discuss your transition plan and new responsibilities. For the next 30 minutes, they outlined a role so deliberately diminished it was insulting, stripped of budget authority, team management, and any meaningful decision-making. Power. The message was clear. Accept this humiliation or leave. Additionally, Jack added with barely concealed satisfaction, we'll need you to sign this. Acknowledgement of performance concerns. He slid another document forward, a pre-written confession to various professional failings, backdated to create the impression of ongoing issues. I'll need to review this with HR present, I responded, knowing they couldn't reasonably object to such a standard procedure. Richard checked his watch with theatrical impatience. Fine, we'll schedule that for tomorrow. In the meantime, your team, correction, Jack's team now, is waiting for a transition briefing. They've been quite cooperative in identifying areas of concern in your management approach. The implication was clear. My own team was being turned against me. I had to appear unfazed. Happy to brief them completely, I agreed. Full transparency has always been my policy. Excellent. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Jack will sit in, of course. Of course. As we walked toward the conference room, I activated the second phase of our plan with a seemingly casual question. By the way, has either of you spoken with Arizona Robbins? Recently, she reached out to me about some historical marketing data from before my time. Both men froze momentarily, exactly the reaction I'd hoped for. Arizona Robbins, my predecessor who'd been similarly forced out, had agreed to come forward after Addison contacted her. Her testimony about the pattern of behavior would be devastating. Arizona is bound by a confidentiality agreement, Richard said stiffly. Interesting you mentioned that specifically. I noted. I wasn't aware her departure involved confidentiality concerns. Jack shot his father a warning look. I'd successfully created the first crack in their united front. The marketing team looked uncomfortable as we entered the conference room. Faces that had beamed with pride at our Asia success just days ago now avoided eye contact. Jack positioned himself at the head of the table, my former seat, while Richard stood by the door like a guard. Team, Jack began with forced authority. As you know, Derek will be transitioning to a more focused role while I take over department leadership. We need a comprehensive download of all projects, particularly Asia. I smiled pleasantly and opened my presentation materials. Happy to provide that. Let's start with the original projections I submitted to the board in January. The slides I displayed showed the authentic data, not the manipulated versions Richard and Jack had prepared. Several team members looked confused, glancing between my presentation and Jack's increasingly flustered expression. These don't match the final reports, Jack interjected. Don't they? How strange, I replied innocently. These are the exact files I presented with the timestamp and board meeting minutes referenced in the footer. Perhaps we should examine when and how the final reports were modified. Richard stepped forward. That's enough. This technical discussion isn't productive for the team. On the contrary, I countered, transparency about our financial reporting seems extremely relevant to everyone's work going forward. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I glanced down to see Addison's message. SEC representatives arriving at Oceanic reception in 5 minutes. Don't react. Right on schedule. I continued the presentation calmly while Richard's phone began buzzing. Repeatedly. He stepped outside to take a call, his face visibly paling as he listened. What's happening? Jack demanded when Richard beckoned him urgently. Nothing that concerns this meeting, Richard snapped. Derek, continue your transition briefing. Jack, I need you immediately. Jack hesitated, clearly torn between maintaining control of the meeting and responding to the urgency in his father's voice. We'll take a 15-minute break, he announced before hurrying out. The moment the door closed, the atmosphere in the room transformed. Meredith spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. What's really going on, Derek? The numbers they showed us yesterday don't match what you're presenting now. That's because they've been systematically altering the financial data, I replied calmly. They're setting me up to take the fall for accounting fraud. Shocked murmurs rippled through the team. Christina slipped back into the room, her expression tense with excitement. SEC agents just entered the building with federal marshals, she reported. They're seizing computers and files from the executive floor. Richard looks like he's about to have a stroke. I checked my watch, right on schedule. Addison had filed the whistleblower complaint with supporting evidence at precisely 8:30 a.m., triggering the regulatory response we'd coordinated. Listen carefully, I told my team. In about 5 minutes, IT will lock down all systems. Before that happens, I need each of you to email yourselves copies of your original work on the Asia campaign, your authentic reports, not the versions that have been circulating recently. They moved quickly, understanding the gravity of the situation. Years of working together had built the trust that Richard and Jack had tried to destroy overnight. Through the glass walls of the conference room, we watched the executive floor transform into a scene of controlled chaos. Men and women in suits methodically moved from office to office, securing documents and electronic devices. Richard stood with legal counsel, his face ashen. Jack paced nearby, gesturing frantically into his phone. Owen from IT burst into our conference room. Derek, someone just tried to mass delete all your archived emails and project files using Richard's admin credentials. Good thing we implemented that backup protocol you suggested last year. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. My insistence on robust data security, which Richard had repeatedly questioned as unnecessary, was now preventing him from destroying evidence. My phone rang. Addison. It's happening, she said without preamble. The SEC had enough to move immediately based on the evidence we provided. Richard and Jack are being questioned separately. Bailey is cooperating fully. What about the team? I asked, looking at the concerned faces around me. Tell them to comply with all requests for information. Those who cooperate are protected under whistleblower statutes. As I relayed this to the team, the conference room door opened again. This time, Preston from legal entered, accompanied by 2 agents. Derek Shepard? One agent asked. We need to speak with you regarding financial reporting practices at Oceanic Innovations. Preston looked defeated. The board has authorized full cooperation with this investigation. They've also requested an emergency session this afternoon to address leadership concerns. I nodded and stood to follow the agents. As we walked past the executive offices, I caught a glimpse of Richard being escorted to a separate conference room, his lawyer hurrying alongside. Our eyes met briefly across the floor. In that moment, I saw the realization dawn on him. His perfect scapegoat had just orchestrated his downfall. 4 hours of detailed questioning followed. I provided my evidence methodically, the original reports, the timestamps of alterations, the pattern of behavior, the recordings from our meeting that morning where they had essentially tried to force me to take responsibility for the fraudulent numbers. By late afternoon, the situation had evolved dramatically. The board convened an emergency session where the preliminary findings were presented. Richard and Jack were placed on administrative leave pending the investigation's completion. Bailey, having demonstrated she was an unwilling participant through coercion, was appointed interim CEO. As the board meeting concluded, Burke approached me in the hallway. The chairman wants to see you privately, he said, unable to hide his amazement at how quickly events had unfolded. In the chairman's office, I found myself facing not just one person but the entire executive committee. Their expressions ranged from embarrassment to grudging respect. Mr. Shepard, the chairman began, in light of today's revelations, we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. The integrity of Oceanic's leadership has been compromised at the highest level. I remain silent, waiting. Your Asia expansion represents our most successful growth initiative in a decade. More importantly, your actions today, while personally risky, protected this company from potentially catastrophic legal consequences. He slid a document across the desk. The board is unanimously offering you the position of interim chief operating officer while we navigate this transition. We need someone with both operational knowledge and unquestionable integrity. I studied their faces, seeing the calculation behind the offer. They needed damage control, reputation management, and operational stability. I represented their best option on all fronts. I'll need complete authority to restructure the marketing division, I replied, and a full audit of All financial reporting across departments. Done, the chairman agreed without hesitation. And my team receives full recognition and compensation adjustments for the Asia success. Also approved. I accepted the offer with a firm handshake, already planning the changes needed to rebuild what Richard had nearly destroyed. As I left the boardroom, Meredith was waiting with the rest of the marketing team. Their expressions told me they'd already heard about my new position. So, she said with a growing smile, I guess they really do invite you to board meetings for good news sometimes. I laughed for what felt like the first time in years. Not always, but sometimes the worst invitation leads to the best outcome if you're willing to fight for what's right. 3 weeks later, I sat in the COO's office, my office now reviewing the final report on the financial investigation. Richard and Jack faced criminal charges for securities fraud and obstruction of justice. The company was implementing stringent new governance controls. And the Asia expansion, now properly represented in all financial documents, was projected to become the foundation of Oceanic's global growth strategy for years to come. On my desk sat a new nameplate and a framed photo of my marketing team. Beside it was a simple handwritten note from Bailey. Sometimes the people they try to bury turn out to be the seeds. I smiled at the truth in those words as I prepared for that morning's executive meeting, one where I would finally present my vision for the company's future without manipulation or politics or fear. The boardroom no longer represented betrayal. It had become the place where I would help rebuild what nearly had been lost with integrity, transparency, and the team that had stood by me when it mattered most.